Thank you all for coming. The last session on the last day. We're a little shocked. Tim and I had a bet going on. We had a couple bets.
The overflow room's open for us.
Hello to everyone in the overflow room.
I can't hear them.
We can't hear them. Shout louder. There we go. There we go. We heard them. All right. Slides are coming up. We got a couple of cool things. Like I said, Tim and I had a bit of a bet going on exactly how deep we want to go. And I said, let's let it rip.
Hit the bottom of the dip.
When Tim and I were working on the slides, we wear our face huggers so we can work with the slides in 3 dimensions as we go through it. So this is all done by that. So this is the culmination of 2-3 months of kind of interaction between Tim and myself, specifically around Platform SSO. Not that we don't have reasons to call each other anyway, but we did do a lot of conversations around this.
It looks so cool when we call each other.
Our wives really love it. They think it's fantastic, walking around the house with this. So we're going to go through a little bit of slides on what Platform SSO is. It will get a little bit deep, so completely understand as we go through this. Questions, raise your hand, we'll throw around the box. Happy to answer them, happy to do that. And then the final half, Tim has taken some work that I had done and done much better work with it, and has created a Platform SSO service that you can run on your own machine. You will never be offline. You will always be reachable because you'll have your own PSSO service to go with it. And we're doing this because we think it's really important for you as admins in particular to understand how this works, to know what happens and how this goes along, right? If you've been in the Platform SSO Slack channel, who's in the PSSO Slack channel? All right, fantastic. You'll notice that there's a lot of confusion, questions. It's one of these newer technologies where it kind of seems like it's magic until it doesn't work. And then maybe it still is magic, but not magic for you, right? And part of that is because it is a complex situation. There are a lot of moving parts with Platform SSO, and that's why we want to go through them, all right? So hopefully this will make it easier for people to understand whether it goes wrong or right, and more importantly, and I think this is something that Tim in particular, but both of us want to get out, there are various reasons for Platform SSO. It was designed to do particular things. Those particular things are over here. It's been asked to do things by admins. Those particular things are over here. Sometimes that Venn diagram meets, sometimes it does not, all right? And I think many folks who approach Platform SSO expect it to be a particular functionality, potentially replacement for Nomad Login, or all of the family of products that have been built off of that, Jamf Connect, Xcreds, and a number of things like that. It's not quite that, all right? But there is probably a world where you can kind of blend these things together, all right? So cool. With that, we're gonna get into some slides, go over what it is, and then get into the demos in a little bit, how you can do this at home. All right, what it is. macOS 13 Plus, right? Came out 2 years ago, Platform SSO. Now I should probably say 2.5 years ago, right? We're coming up on the 3rd major iteration of the operating system. Since then, it, in a general sense, connects your Mac to an IDP.
Cloud binding.
Cloud binding. Lots of asterisks, caveats, and other things to that, right? Yeah. And we'll get into some of those things. It can synchronize passwords. And I think that's what the vast majority of people in this room or vast majority of Mac admins wanted it to do. In particular, if it's an Apple supplied, Apple made, Apple sponsored, Apple run, and it's a free service that you can get, why would you maybe need some of these third-party products that are out there? All right, we're gonna talk about that. The primary functionality for Platform SSO is not to do password synchronization. And it is not even to create users on the account, on the machine. That was kind of added after the fact. The primary use case for Platform SSO is to get SSO tokens into the system to be used by, and I don't know, somebody from Apple will correct me, what's the current eSSO? Extensible SSO, SSO Extension, Extensible SSO Extension? Yes, all of the above. Thank you. So the primary focus of Platform SSO is to prime the pump for an SSO extension. And that way the user has some credential, some identity that's been established on that device before they try to go use a resource. Again, this is counterintuitive to what I think a lot of us wanted out of this when we started, which was a way to create users, a way to maybe do more of a cloud bind, like we've heard, like we've talked about. And so we're going to get into some of those specifics as we get through here. All right, that's why we have this highlighted in blue. Maybe that's the wrong way of doing it. Primary function is to extend single sign-on. Tim and I are going to talk about this a lot because it's a big common theme that we've taken away from this. So if we had to kind of boil this down, and I think Tim wrote this, so any concerns about wording or anything else would be directed to Tim. Platform single sign-on is a native way to get single sign-on tokens, and that's already a loaded term, but we'll get there. At the login to allow an enterprise single sign-on extension, ESSO, E is for enterprise? Extensible. But you have enterprise single sign-on extension.
I didn't copy and paste it. You
From
can copy and paste
you. I did. He is correct. I did copy and paste it. But I think I copy and pasted it from him. ESSO is a system extension to share tokens between apps and web pages. And this is the heart of what we're trying to do here. By using Platform SSO and having that guide itself into ESSO, when you open up Safari, in some cases when you open up Chrome, in some cases, lesser cases when you open up other apps, that user will already be signed in, right? And ideally, truly bringing the dream of single sign-on to the user that we've been talking about for a while, that you may have bought a number of products for large amounts of money to come to, and more maybe getting a little bit closer to that. All right, things that PSSO is not, although maybe many people want it to be. All right, and here's where you have the big asterisk caveats, the list of things that people kind of run headlong into thinking that some of these things are in here. Primary ones that we run into, it's not a way of getting third-party MFA at the login window. If you have a requirement to have a user use MFA before signing into the device, Platform SSO will not provide that for you. If you talk to Apple, and there is definitely some logic behind this, Apple has put some thought into the concept of the device itself being a form of MFA. It's something that you have, right? You have to go through a registration process to get Platform SSO up and running. So therefore, you've registered that device could be considered a factor, right? And some of you may have regulators and compliance officers that will agree to that. Some of you may not, all right? So again, this is all about just managing expectations. That if your expectation is a user's going to be at the login window and somehow they're going to be able to use a pass key or push MFA or something else like that, you're not going to get that out of Platform SSO, right? There may be some ways that we can kind of graph this in here, but the bigger problem here is so far, Platform SSO has not changed the native Mac login window. All right? You still get the exact same username, password fields, and other things. Some side effects of this. And this is also something people run into as they kick the tires on Platform SSO. If you have a password that needs to be changed, pretty common, brand new user, you send them out a default password, the first time they sign in, they have to change that. They can't do that at the login window with Platform SSO, all right? So this is already starting to kill some of the zero trust, no touch deployment options that you have with this, all right? And that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Platform SSO at the top level looks like a thing you really want. And I don't disagree with that. It should be a thing you really want. This functionality is something that you really should be interested in. However, it's going to break down in some of the flows that you're expecting it to work in, right? In particular, the case where your user can't log in because they've got to change the password, they probably can't log in, period, right? Unless your IDP does some hoop jumping to say, maybe this time it's okay. But then you've got to go back to those regulators and compliance officers and talk to them about why you're doing that. Right? It's not a method to create a user on the machine, the first user on the machine, right? Before Platform SSO can kick in and actually start, and if you're going to do a selfie, let's do a real one. All right. So before Platform SSO can kick in, it has to be registered. And so this is where we have a chicken and the egg problem. That Platform SSO is not registered doing a device enrollment flow or any other way like that. It typically requires user enrollment, user interaction. The IDP wants to know that this is a good user. The IDP maybe wants to present MFA dialogues to the user. With going through those, you can't do that at the login window, and this is where you have the chicken and the egg problem. Somebody has to be signed into the device, in a perfect world through ADE, so they may have come in through an identity provider to begin with. We don't have a real great handoff, though, between that user that's enrolled through that ADE web view at the beginning of the Mac Setup Assistant and whoever lands on the desktop, right? There's not an easy way to have a token or a cookie or something extend through that session. And that's where Apple has allowed IDPs to do whatever they want at this stage, but it does require that registration. So a user has to sign in and has to be registered there. It is not necessarily compatible with existing OAuth IDP flows. And this is probably where you've seen not nearly as much adoption as I think a lot of folks would like to see from other vendors that are out there. We'll talk about the two solutions that are currently in market with Microsoft and Okta. One's V2, one's V1, so already you're seeing some problems there. But this was not necessarily an easy thing for IDPs to put into. If you're familiar with some of the OAuth, OpenID Connect flows that are out there, these are in the same vein, but they are not the same. So an IDP does have to do, to some degree, some fairly significant work to be able to support Platform SSO. And I understand why those choices were taken and why they were made, and I don't think they were crazy, but it does mean that that's why we have this pretty significant lag between when this hits the market and when it's out there. And as a quick show of hands, who's using Okta for Platform SSO? All right, a couple of hands, good, good. Who's using Microsoft? A lot more hands, so that's fantastic. Is Microsoft public shipping? Yes. It's shipping. Public preview. Which is supported, but I think the date they've given is January, correct? For general availability? It's what? It's a placeholder. Yeah. It could change. And it has changed how many times already? 10? Yes? So, yes. It has definitely been a little bit of a moving target. And this isn't, and I'm not trying to cast shade on Apple or any of the vendors that have this, but it's just a reality of this, is that these flows are not necessarily just cut and dry, shake and bake. I'm mixing metaphors again on this. That an IDP can just have it work, right? That was kind of the beauty of things like Xcreds, things like Jamf Connect, Nomad Login. A lot of them used existing flows to be able to authenticate the user. You can go to your Entra setup, you can go to your Okta setup, and you can set up some of these third-party login windows without any additional work or even Entra, Okta, Dump Cloud, whatever, even knowing what that is, right? However, with this, your IDP has to be bought into it. And so that takes some time to be able to do that. So currently supported, and supported maybe could be in quotes based upon where they are. I know Okta is in full production with V1. I'm not from Okta, so I have no idea if they're planning on V2 or anything else like that. Microsoft was with V1 until kind of surprisingly a couple of months ago, people noticed all the V2 stuff started working. So that was really cool to see that out there. So you can now create users at the login window with Entra, and it's all set up through Company Portal. There was a session yesterday on that. I did not go to. Tim did, right? Yes. Yeah, it was good? Very important. Good. But I think we're covering different things.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
There you go. Tim says we're covering different things. So if you went to that session yesterday, we'll give you new information here. If you didn't go to that session yesterday and you want to see a look of what a production-ish public preview may be available later looks like, go to the Microsoft session, because they have done a lot of work on this, and I think they already have the welts on the forehead and the scars on the arms from some of the early feedback and some of the missing pieces that are in here. All right, so V1 and V2, and there is a pretty significant difference between V1 and V2. I think we get into this in a little bit later, but V2 is where the action really is what a lot of people want. Right? V2 is where you can create users. It's a little more with the password syncing. It's a lot more functionality to it. So V2 is a good V to have. 2 is more than 1, twice is more than 1. All right. So this was what V2 added, which was new in Sonoma. All right. So that was user creation at the login window, full tokens at the login window, where prior I think it was only at the screensaver, I think. And then some authorization database integration. Has anyone played around with the groups and some of the administrative rights? Kind of cool, right?
Groups are
Okay, so you got to have Tim's Platform SSO service and then run your own groups on your own machine. So that's maybe another rough edge. They support V2, but they've got to add it into the token in a different way than I think they were expecting.
So they announced yesterday that they're going to have a
Jump box, catch box. Ooh. Oh. For those of you on the live stream, Sean Rabbit made an amazing catch. Was
With my iPhone and my computer.
with his iPhone and his computer,
Anyone?
and we unfortunately hit a little. Am I not supposed to throw it? We used to throw it, right? You're supposed to throw it.
You're supposed to throw better.
I'm supposed to throw it accurately. Is the catch box not? Okay, fantastic. I'm still doing better. All right.
So Microsoft was saying yesterday that those features will come with the upcoming company portal update.
Okay.
They don't have a date on that company
Okay.
portal update. What happened now?
Yeah. So again, watch the Microsoft session, and we won't harp on this too much, but just it's a statement around there's a lot of moving pieces to this, and adherence to a protocol does not necessarily mean adherence to all the pieces that are with it, right? The group integration can be kind of cool. You can supply groups to users when they get created through Platform SSO. And even more interesting, although there's some underlying structural problems to this, adding groups or adding users to authorization rights so you can have people, non-admins, change the time zone. Things that we may have been doing many, many years ago, maybe still are doing, can be done through Platform SSO. However, there are some basic functionality within that rights system that gets a little bit creaky if anybody's ever played around with that. So there may be dragons. New in Sequoia, mandatory checks, all right? Previously, if it couldn't reach the IDP, it says, and we just went on. So now there's a whole set of settings that you can have to force it to connect to the IDP and make sure that the IDP is generally available before being allowed to sign in. Corresponding to that are some grace periods. Because if you are going to have full-time checks and somebody's on a plane, maybe you want to have some grace period to do that. There's some interesting complexity that gets in here, and I'm kind of two minds as to how much this gets you or doesn't, right? And in previous products, we've dealt with this, and there's not a good way always of doing it. You have to kind of just stick your finger a bit in the wind and see what you can get away with from regulators or whatever else on there. Biggest thing for me is the ability to ignore some users. Prior to Sequoia, everybody on the device had to be a Platform SSO user, right? So every time you signed in, you'd get this little prompt in the corner saying, hey friend, time for you to register and get through this process of getting Platform SSO set up. And if you had a local admin account, that was kind of weird, right? Because you would never want that to be associated with a cloud account. Because hopefully you're using actual credentials for users and not service accounts for your cloud accounts, for at least your admins. And so you shouldn't want to have any sort of corresponding connection between those. So now you can actually have it ignore certain usernames, which is great. So that's going to be a real big piece of functionality for large organizations or anyone that has admin accounts on the system. So a couple of user authentication methods. And this is where also some of the trickiness gets into, right? Most people want to use Platform SSO for the top one, which is the password. The password allows you to do the synchronization of the local password to the cloud password, right? It's what a lot of people want out of Platform SSO. There are a couple of other methods. We're only going to talk about one of them because the other two I don't care about, but that's the user secure enclave key. And the user secure enclave key works a little bit more like Windows Hello for Business, where you're creating a hardware-backed key. In this case on the Mac, it's the secure enclave, that's then used to express that user identity going forward. There is no password synchronization, but by associating a hardware-backed credential to a user, you're able to get a new SSO session for that user as they sign in without them having to worry about anything else. And it is truly the embodiment of why this is here, which is to prime the pump on the SSO extension, all right? However, it does not synchronize the password. And so a lot of people are like, well, I came here for password synchronization. And then you say, well, no, this is really a way of priming the SSO pump, so password shouldn't matter. Let's go back to a hardware-based credential, because that's better than a password anyway, which is 100% a true fact, all right? And so why don't we use these modern methods? Now, this is very much in correspondence with Windows Hello for Business, where you set up a PIN on the device, right? As a longtime Apple fan and Apple shareholder, just putting that out there, I really like the Windows Hello for Business kind of user flows. I understand there's some other underlying problems that we've got to go into, but I like the concept of a user having a PIN, a local password that's very clearly demarcated as that, as opposed to having to use their cloud password locally, right? Because a lot of the problems that we're getting into are your cloud password has to change every 90 days, your cloud password requires MFA, your cloud password apps require MFA and conditional access and all these other great things that as a identity industry we've built, right? That's great. But a lot of those don't really apply to the local system anymore, all right? Offline sign-in, how do I do file vault, how do I do all these things? And Platform SSO is gradually kind of cutting away at some of those problems, which is great. But that user secure enclave key is a great way to do this. But it doesn't synchronize the password. Your boss, whoever is buying the software, saw the password synchronization, and now they want to put it in, and then you've got to have this conversation, right? I think a lot of the other two vendors, I'll say at least very much one of them, very heavily encouraging using the secure enclave keys, because then you remove a lot of this confusion around my password changed, I need to reset it to login window, but I can't because I don't have the UI to do that, right? Using the secure enclave keys removes all of that problem, and then still allows you to do things. The problem here, and maybe we just need to get smarter, there's no real good ways to use something like Xcreds or Jamf Connect in addition to Platform SSO at the same time. As that might be the perfect world, because you'd be able to still create users, log in with your modern authentication. However, you would still have these Platform SSO secure enclave back keys to get your extensible SSO rolling.
It works.
It does.
I tried it.
Okay. You heard it here first.
More testing to come.
More testing to come. Dates may change. All right. The two methods that I don't care about, smart card, who's still using smart cards? Sucks to be you, sorry. It actually works pretty well and because you already have a hardware back credential in that smart card. So if you are using smart cards, Platform SSO is actually not a bad thing. Again, your mileage may vary with your vendors because there is some complexities as ensuring the signatures and everything else. There is also a WS trust flow that I believe was designed to allow you to use some ADFS or some WS Fed fallbacks where you're still federated back to AD. And my heart goes out to you if you're still federated back to AD. I apologize. People should buy you drinks at the bar of whatever your favorite beverage is. But we're not going to cover that here. All right, so again, this is the one where most people think it is, but it's the only way to get password sync. Most people are actually probably going to start using the secure enclave key because it does come with the fewest issues and it gives you a little bit more bang for the buck. But you've got to get over that password isn't synced. I would love for a world, this is my soapbox, I'll stand on for a little bit. I didn't put this in the slides. I'd love for a world where Apple kind of followed some of that similar mentality to Windows Hello for Business. Because right now you can have a local password, but your users don't get that that's different from what your cloud password may be, right? And so that's where the confusion is. If the dialog boxes on the Mac were very clearly labeled, this is your local PIN, like they do show up on Windows, I think users would be pretty okay with having a different password locally than they did for a cloud. A lot of the security folks would be excited about that because a local compromise would then not mean a cloud compromise, vice versa. Everything becomes a little bit easier with that. All right. Some pieces that you have to have here. We'll talk about this. This is kind of like your bill of materials. I have right. Interesting. Huh. I've never seen that lying around. All right. You need an app with an extensible single sign-on extension, right? So there is a client piece to this. The IDP, in most cases, has to provide this. Tim may talk about some ways that you can kind of bend those rules, but for the most part, the IDP is going to have to provide this. There are some IDP URLs and some other stuff that have to be put up there. You can kind of see these as you go through the documentation that Tim has on it. And of course, the app has to support Platform SSO. Just because the app supports ESSO, it's got to add another few entry points to be able to support PSSO. All right? So again, the IDP in the most cases has to be bought into that. The device has to be using MDM. You cannot test this or use these profiles locally. I mean, you can try to use the profiles locally, double click, whatever else, but they're not going to work. All right, so this configuration has to be MDM pushed. There's a few of those in the Apple world, but this is very much different, very much one of them. And you also have to have an Apple App Site Association file. although Tim's finding out that maybe that's a little bit fungible in the latest ones.
So you have to have it if you want to use ESSO. So you do need it. But if you're just using PSSO to get tokens to never use, you don't actually need the site association.
Yeah.
So that's important for my demo.
We'll get there. The Apple App Site Association file has been used for a few other things. It is kind of fun because Apple hits it, not from your local device, but from their CDN. So if you're watching your hits coming into your Apple App Site Association file, it's kind of fun. Must be a public IP and generally trusted. So needs real SSL that travels back to one of the root certs in the browsers effectively to be able to work with that. How it works. So we'll do a little bit of overview. We're actually doing pretty well on time. Note, network flow has been simplified for your learning pleasure. Nonsense, heavy crypto, and other things have been glossed over for the purpose of fitting things in. So do not treat this as gospel. Treat the code that Tim has, because you'll actually see the flows in the code as what actually goes on. So we are hand waving over some of the pieces here. So don't at me, right? Is that what the kids say? All right, prep work. You got an IDP, you got a Mac. IDP has that well-known Apple App Site Association, valid and trusted SSL cert, and support for PSSO. Right. With that, you will then add your app. Tim's got a different icon that he'll show you. I like my icon better. What's the IP rules on Genmoji for icons?
I don't know.
Ooh.
Created by AI, so can't be.
So there's no IP.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's all IP.
Machines can't own anything. So yet. The PSSO app has to be installed in /applications. This shouldn't be a big deal because that's usually where these installers put them, but just a note to have it in there. If it's not installed in applications, the extensions are never going to work. So if you are testing this locally, if you're trying to build your own, that's a big thing that comes in. You're also going to have an MDM profile that covers PSSOE with the various particular pieces in it.
You do provide application, open source application to have the PSSO extension, as well as the MDM example profile for all the different keys. So when you do this yourself, you'll have all the parts. There's a lot of parts, and it kind of works by default out of the box, which I'm going to show. But as we hit all these different things, you're probably in your mind thinking, I don't have that. Who's going to do that? I don't have that. Who's going to do that? We provide it all. You get easy, and then you can start pulling it apart and understanding it.
And this is why Tim's wearing the lab coat.
What's that? Your mic. Can somebody up top turn my mic on?
Well, I don't think the mics work in the room. I think they're purely for the recording. Oh, you hear me?
It's subtle, but it's there.
Okay. Downstairs can hear me. Thank you. Hi.
The reason.
Oh.
Okay.
Remove the lab coat, Tim. You're going to have to earn that back.
I think Joel turned it off remotely. I think that's what happened.
While I was driving. All right, device registration. This is what the user will see the first time they sign in. So again, can't create the initial user on the Mac through Platform SSO. Once they have been created, the user will be invited to register for Platform SSO. This is interactive, and it's interactive because there are some device keys that are created, especially with version 2, that have to get sent up to that IDP, all right? It's interactive, which means a human's got to touch it, which means you're going to have to warehouse your Macs, or you're going to have to make sure your users do this.
And this is by design.
This is by design.
Right.
So, but it does mean that maybe zero touch became zero touch plus 1 or 2.
Well, the user, if you think about it, when they log in, if the user knows all the information, which is their local password and their cloud password, it's providing a service to the user that they're going to use. So it's focused, it's user-centric.
User-centric.
By design.
By
which
design.
Does not necessarily means it's enterprise-focused.
But it
Is
also
this
means
only for the password method, or is this for Sakura Enclave too?
even with the password method, the device still has to be registered. So the
All right.
first sign-in of a user that hasn't been created through Platform SSO will see this to register the device. IDPs can show their own UI, so there may be MFA enrollment and things like that. I believe Microsoft is doing this through the company portal app.
Yeah,
but
they
you do
are.
have to go to the company portal app and then sign in.
And then they
through
got
that.
they got the silent device registration, so that's why I asked about it. Like I've been
But the
testing
user still has to
silent.
click on this to initiate the silent device registration.
You got somebody behind you.
Just a quick reminder for everyone in this room, there are people in the overflow room watching this, and they cannot hear your questions unless you have the Catchbox. So if you have a burning question you want to ask and interrupt Joel and Tim with, put your hand up and make sure you catch the box. Thanks.
Or
But you
Tim and
have-
I will be better at repeating the question.
Yeah, Joel's been very good so far of repeating the question, so
Hey,
bravo.
Joel, catch.
Hey, 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 hey.
That's going to be a meme tomorrow.
For the people on the live stream, I just got handed a really bad throw, but I caught it. It was a flat out reach and grab. It would have been great in any sport that I don't know very much about. But this is Tim's laptop, so break it all you want.
The more scratches, the better it looks.
All right, so yeah, we'll do a better job of repeating the questions, and I can throw this around in very dangerous ways as
You
we
can
go.
pass it around, too. I don't
Well,
know.
sure, but what's the fun in that? All right,
Sorry.
so the device still has to be registered. IDPs have some different ways of doing that, but the user is still going to have to click on this to the point where Tim was saying it is very user-focused for the registration part. Some changes happen in the middle of macOS 14, which is you were even seeing this for users created from Platform SSO from the beginning. So you would sign in, create a new user through Platform SSO, this would pop up, and you were like, I just created the, So they fixed that, which is great. So it's a little less in there, but there is a situation where a user, a recalcitrant user, can ignore this, all right? So then you may want to do some carrot and stick kind of mentality to make sure that maybe they can't go to resources that they really need without this, or maybe, find your favorite way of doing scripting to determine if this has been set up, a couple of things like that. But it is maybe a place where some more work could be done. Cool. All right. During that registration, this is the V2 flow, but assigning an encryption key, they're not technically certificates, but that's the best thing I have to represent crypto. So assigning an encryption key, actually, although they are certs, aren't they?
Yes.
They are. All right. So ignore that previous.
It's an
comment.
identity.
Please
It's a
cut that
private
out.
key
Do we have the, sorry, James? Is that available here? Maybe not. It can be. It can be. For me?
We will loan you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So on registration, the PSSO app sends a device encryption and a device signing cert to the IDP. And then all of the comms from then on are kind of managed by these keys here. It's a really tight, really crypto forward way of doing this. And so the security on this is really good. I did want to poke around and maybe find some holes, but I haven't been able to do that. So it's good crypto that's in here, and I think they're going about it in a good way. It is just very heavy and a different form of crypto in many cases than most IDPs are currently using.
Can I point out one thing in here? Because this is what.
You're going to say it anyway. What if I said no?
Joel, be quiet. So it generates the two keys, the public key and the private key locally, and then it just shares the public key up to the service so it can create this encrypted and signed channel. That's really what it's doing. It's creating the keys that it only has access to, and then the IDP can use that to sign and encrypt. So it looks like for me that it's sending, it's technically correct, we're sending just the certificates, just the public keys. It's not sending what it's generating, which for me was kind of a mind shift that I realized it's not sending everything, it's just sending the public part of that and then using it for a channel.
Just a pen file. And these are not secure enclave backed
Oh, okay.
because they've got to be used by multiple users.
Oh, that's right.
And
Just
they've got to
share
be
your
used before a user signs in. All right, so keep that in mind. They're keys, they're not secure enclave backed. Did we find where they were kept?
I had the keychain, but I don't know if the keychain, which if it's the new or the old one, so it might be somewhat secure enclave back. We need to figure that out.
Yeah, so some more spelunking to be done. User authentication, this is the default UI. This is where some of the silent registration pieces can come in if those are already in there. So it's a little bit up to the Platform SSO app provider to show some of this UI. So this is the default one. If you just say, Apple, handle everything for me, your first flow is going to be you have to type in your local password, right? And this is during the password sync. If you're using Secure Enclave, you won't see this because we don't care about your local password. There's no password to sync. In this case, the system has to get your local password to know if it's the same as the cloud password and be able to compare them back and forth, all right? So user gets prompted, and then this is where your own app can either show its own custom UI or if you don't bother to set up your own custom UI, you see something like this, which is just a username password field, which then gets set up. So it all makes sense, but for users it may be a little weird, because I just put in a password and then I got to put in a password again, and I think they're the same password, but the icons look a little different, and the IT staff keeps sending me these phishing emails to prove I'm not being phished, and they all say, don't type your password in a lot, and here I'm typing password into weird things with demonic little emoji on them. Everything's going to be fine, right? So there is a little bit of user education to maybe be done here, or it's up to the IDP to make it a little more familiar, add it into their own apps like Microsoft is doing with Company Portal, so they can do that. All right, IDPs show custom UI. In the case of the password sync, your password then does get sent to the IDP. All right, and again, we're hand waving here, but you can kind of think of this as a ROPG in the Microsoft parlance, an ROPC flow, where a password in some form, there are some ways of encrypting it, but at the end, it's a password that can be fully decrypted into plain text, gets sent up to the IDP. The IDP can then query and check that password against its database and then send back down a token, which is then used by the device to check your password, everything else like that in it.
So this password is the cloud password that they type in. It's not the local password, because your local password is going to be changed to the cloud password.
Correct.
So it's only getting the encrypted or non-encrypted through SSL, protected, to check to make sure you say you are who you are.
Is that, are you writing things on the board?
No, I'm just pointing at you.
Oh.
You have the little fingers.
There's
I
some
have the little
grep and
marker.
awk on there. I thought that was
It
you.
just makes me look cool.
Yeah, all right. I hope the camera is panning appropriately over there when you talk. All right, so once your password is checked in the password synchronization flow, you do get an ID token back. It is pretty similar to an ID token that you'd get out of OpenID Connect. It's not quite the same, but it's similar. And then that's used by the system to check groups, to do other things like that with it. So that part of the flow is actually relatively familiar and close to OAuth as we go through.
Can I jump in here? Because don't make it think that it's an OIDC token when it says ID token, because if you take out the space, it looks a lot like I know what that is. It contains the same information, but it's put inside this SAML-like token that gets sent down that you have to know about.
You're playing a little fast and loose there, but yes.
It's in a format that's not an OIDC
Correct.
format.
It is close, it is adjacent, but it is not the same, which is why, again, you're seeing the IDPs sometimes have a little bit more trouble having to support this, because it's not just a take it off the shelf and use that same code kind of flow. That is correct.
Yep.
Tim is right in that particular piece.
Thank you.
Just a note. There are some cool new UI. So once you do get this set up and running, there are some visual indicators, green, red, jelly beans, as to whether it's been set up, whether you need to repair it. This will be shown in, I think this is Sonoma. I don't know that the Sequoia UI has changed much.
When you register, it does change. I haven't noticed any significant changes here.
Yeah.
But when you do click on repair, it pulls the new UI up. New UI up.
So if you do go to System Preferences, and of course you can never find anything, so just search for it, and then look at what's on the right. You will see that there is a network account server, and maybe this is what the back scratcher is for. Right here, there is a network account server, and if you hit Edit, you'll come up. There is no network account service, but there is a platform single sign-on. So this is where you would see, God forbid, hopefully you don't have this, an AD plugin set up or something along those lines. So that's now where Platform SSO shows. And if you are, for the morbidly curious, you can open up Directory Utility. You will marvel at the fact that Directory Utility still exists on the Mac. And you will also see that there is, in your search and contacts path now, you will have your Platform SSO agent that's in there. And so some of the pieces in the dark back of your brain that you may have learned about the AD plugin is somewhat still analogous to this plugin, as it does kind of function as a directory services plugin. We'll get a little bit more into that as we go through the whole account creation process.
Can I point out one thing about repair? I had some confusion about what magic it does, but this is really the way to kick off it again. So when you enroll, it asks you for your credentials, so it does the device binding, and then it also does the user association. If you do repair under network, it allows you to redo the binding for the machine, and then if you do it under the user, it just basically redoes that registration for the user. So repair always, to me, thought it did some magic stuff, and it really just kicks off that flow again.
Yeah.
Like when you get the push notification.
If you do have groups that have been put Tim.
I'm taller? Is
You're,
that what
yeah,
you're
you're a little taller. Ah! Teamwork makes the dream work. So if you are pushing groups through your IDP through Platform SSO, you will see them there, and they are predicated with Platform SSO, so you kind of know they came from that. Right, so that's also kind of a fun thing to do if you get that functionality. If you click on the user themselves, they will have whether they have tokens present and registered. The tokens part is probably the more interesting thing. Registered kind of denotes that Platform SSO is set up, the user has been invited to participate, and they are participating in it. The endpoint, the payload, the whole point of this is these tokens here, which are the tokens that are then given to the extensible SSO extension to be able to then do the magic of SSO. All right?
And I'm going to put the caveat here again. You see tokens, you think it's an OIDC token. It is not an OIDC token. It's that information, that ID token that was given to you, that is in what the IDP gives you, and then you just provide it, which you then give back to IDP. This looks like it's an OIDC workflow because of the terminology, but it's a different defined token.
We are triggering Tim's PTSD.
Yes.
From.
Well, I had a lot of confusion about this because I made a lot of bad assumptions, and that I'm just trying to be honest.
Because you know what they say about assumptions. They start with A, end with S. All right, so tokens registration, a little bit about the V2 flow. What Tim's going to show you in a little bit is the new user creation. New user creation requires a bootstrap token from your MDM. That shouldn't be a problem anymore, but just make sure that when you're trying to do this, this is my PTSD because I lost half a day. I'm like, why isn't this working? Arrgh. And then, oh yeah, I can see it hitting the MDM looking for a bootstrap token. It doesn't have it, right? So you've got the bootstrap token in there. You can now have options for admin users or non-admin users, which is pretty cool. Then the IDP can supply additional groups, as you kind of seen there, in there. So at the login window doesn't change. It's still the same username and password. The trick is, and this is in a lot of the documentation, but I think a lot of folks gloss over it. And this is a little bit of a different flow for users. They've got to sign in this time with a full email address with an @ sign in it. The Platform SSO Directory Services plugin, and I'm using some hand waving here, but yes, is triggered at the login window by an @ sign. If you have a username with an @ sign in it, it will try to sign them in through Platform SSO and create a local account for it. If you do not have a username with an @ sign, it will not create a local account. Now, this is just for the creation of the account. Once the account's created, it doesn't matter, but it's also a little weird for users where to trigger this, they have to use a full email address, but then on subsequent logins, they don't have to.
Can they use whack whack too with the domain name?
Sure.
Okay.
But that won't trigger anything.
Okay.
I
I just enjoy doing that.
If you like upper ASCII characters in your username, so who am I?
Oh, Rich has a question.
Rich has a question.
Hand him the ball.
And the box.
Box.
So when it sets up the local account, can you control the mapping that it's actually using, or are you going to wind up with a home folder named user? You know,
It will trim off the domain, and I think you're going to show this with a new user creation.
Yes. I
Yes.
am.
So it'll trim off the domain, and the IDP and the ID token, I think, can overwrite what the short name is.
Okay.
So you do have some controls there.
Okay, because in our case, our short usernames that we're using in AD bear no resemblance to what our email
You're
addresses
not
are.
alone, and that's a fun thing you're going to have to explore as you go through Platform SSO.
But also remember the flow. If you have an existing account and you log in, it'll ask you to associate that account you just logged in with your cloud one. So he's only talking about ones that are created. If you have an existing one, it's whatever they're logged in at gets associated with that cloud account.
Not confusing.
Not at all.
All right, Mike, we have a Mike Boylan has
Oh,
a
question in the back.
No, you got to use the box. Let people know
Well,
what's
no,
looking
shout
here.
because it's going to take too long.
Come on,
Shout
throw
the
it,
question
throw
and
it.
I'll repeat it.
You still have to complete, does the user still have to go through the interactive registration process before you can use this flow?
So the question is, does the user still have to go through the interactive registration process before they can create new users at the login window? At least one person has to have done that.
That's for the device registration.
Don't hold the box when you swear into it. I heard that from up here. Sorry, James. So yes, again, you still have to have that first. And this is a big head spin for a lot of folks that with the creation at the login window, you're like, fantastic, boom, all right, I can figure out how to push maybe a user account through MDM, great, but then I'll hand the box to a user, they're gonna sign it, it's gonna be amazing. Somebody still has to touch the box first, all right?
By design.
By design. ID token, which isn't an ID token, at least not in the sense that Tim knows an ID token as, comes
Ooh,
back down. And then you get
Don't
a
make
little
me take a
swirly.
poll.
Then there's a flow where you get a certificate pair for the user. There are individual, and this is some of the coolest things, at least that I think Tim agrees with me, but we're probably in a very small group of people who think this is really cool. In that, as part of the V2 flow, a cloud-based smart card, a persistent token is created, all right? And so a key is set up, comes down from the IDP, and it's manifesting itself locally as a smart card. If you go into system info, you'll find a smart card. That smart card is in, ideally, because it's up to the IDP and the flow how to do this, is a private key held by the IDP that is then used to unlock file vault, potentially your keychain. There's some caveats here. Tim's going to get into that. I know he wants to say something. But
I
we're
will
running out of
point
time.
out one thing is that, sorry, Joel, you do get prompted to enter in your local password if you haven't entered your local password in that session at some form, right? So you not randomly, you log in sometimes and it'll say, enter your old local password so it can unlock the keychain. So this unlocks the keychain, but it notices your password's changed by the IDP, it'll have to change the local one. If it already knows that you put in the same password as the keychain unlock, it'll be fine. So if you see the box that says enter your old password, that's not a bug, like when you sometimes get the random keychain dialogues when we're doing things. The old password means that it hasn't gotten that through the flow you're going through.
Misha would like to ask, is the user that is created with platform single sign-on an MDM-enabled user?
Nope.
Did you hear that, Apple?
I mean, that's the right answer, right? I haven't actually checked that, but no. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, you knew the answer before you asked.
Well, I mean, for the rest of the kids, you know?
So, and
They might not have two laptops sitting in front of them with PSSO set up in two different ways. You know, I'm just saying.
The particular case here is users, if you want to get a user channel MDM, these accounts are not those, all right? That's still going to be the first user that would be created through Mac Setup Assistant on the Mac, or if you're using a mobile account, then you have a user channel for those users. This is not a mobile account. It is not also the first account created. It's not user channel enabled. Maybe don't use user channel?
It's your only choice for some types of certificates.
I understand. That's a different session. All right, there is an ECDH agreement, key agreement here. Sequoia brings a new HKDF key derivation
I was going to point out,
functions.
he's being fancier, it just means it generates a shared key.
Yeah. So there are some, and again, cool crypto back here. We're not going to get into that. But this persistent token is then used for file vault and keychain. But it's in ways that, like Tim mentioned, the user still gets prompted sometimes, so it does seem a little bit weird as we go from there. Question in the way back.
Is there a way for us to alter or skip the beginning parts of this workflow and just use the file vault part of this process and remain with something like Jamf Connect?
So the question is there a way to skip a lot of this, get the gooey good bits that you want, but kind of leave out some of the other parts? You have somebody from Jamf that's saying yes. I hope none of my code is still in Jamf Connect, so I can't tell you if it does or not. I hope. Maybe I've seen some of the bugs, they're still there.
Neither confirmed nor denied.
Yeah. So maybe with Jamf, talk to your Jamf friends. One last comment. Because otherwise we're never going to let Tim show his stuff. And he's going to be very sad. And I have to drive back with him to Chicago. I do not want a sad Tim
I have
in the
to take him to
car
the
with me.
airport tomorrow, too. We got a lot of time.
Yeah.
Seething.
Yeah.
I know, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I know, so this is Michael from Microsoft. I did the presentation yesterday. I'd be really careful about trying to do best of both worlds stuff where you do password sync using a tool like a Jamf Connect in combination with the secure enclave key. Make sure, especially if you're in regulated industries, you talk to your security teams about that. Because if you're starting to move towards like passwordless creds, they're probably not going to be too happy if you're doing password sync on them in the background. So be really cautious and think that through. we want to kind of move past this mindset of like password sync needs to exist everywhere, hopefully as an industry.
I plus that. So mileage may vary, but definitely measured twice, 3 times, cut once. All right, authorization groups, they're in there. We talked about that. They may require a log out, log in cycle to take. That is one of the other things, that these aren't, there's no push notifications or there's no push of anything in here. When you change something in the IDP, you've got to have a way of maybe alerting Platform SSO that something's changed, and that's typically by a user logging out and logging back in. If there's not an authentication event, Platform SSO doesn't kick in.
So give an example of this. If you want to get a regular user in a group that's defined by the cloud to install software, you can do that when they enroll as part of that group. It'll put it in that authorization group, authorization rule.
Some guided Q&A. We're going to make this easy. I'm going to give you the questions and the answers. I find that this goes faster. What's the best way to troubleshoot Platform SSO? Glad you asked. There is an app SSO command. You may be using it for the Kerberos extension. Works with Platform SSO. Just use the -S for secure. No, that's the status. So you'll be able to see some of that stuff in there. I think the man page for it is much better now than it was, so it'll actually tell you that it does some of these things. Maybe. You can also log on subsystem com Apple app SSO in the category PO diagnostics. I hate predicates logging subsystems and categories. I just log stream grep, all right, and Platform SSO, and you'll find some stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, does this have to come from my identity provider? Pretty much. It's really hard to do Platform SSO on your own. Tim's going to show you a way of doing that. However, there are some dragons and bears and some other things that are in there, right? So do be careful about that. But in the general case, if you're not the faint of heart, your IDP has to be able to support this and give you the tooling for it, all right?
One of the reasons we have the sample code and the implementation is so your IDP, or if you're an IDP, can look at that and implement it and understand it better. So that's a way to be able to promote understanding of it as well as implementation.
Can I have only some users on the Mac using Platform SSO? Yes, but only in Sequoia. Sequoia, a word that uses every vowel. Tom taught me that.
Sometimes why?
Sequoia E?
Yes.
Yeah.
You just gotta, sometimes put it in there.
But Ching. You came for the jokes, but we're telling you about Platform SSO. Is Platform SSO connected to Apple device enrollment in any way? No. All right, these are 2 entirely separate flows. There is no connection between these 2 things. All right? And the sooner you know that, the less tears you might have. Can my identity provider push a password change? No, not really. Again, there's no way of triggering the Platform SSO client locally by the identity provider. You have to wait for the user to have a sign-in event or for the Platform SSO client to say we want to do it, right? The identity providers, when you create a Platform SSO extension, you're not really creating an extension that does things. You're creating a way of injecting a configuration into Apple's Platform SSO client, all right? And that's why there's not a lot of good two-way connections here. How often is the password synced? I would check the docs on this because I think Sequoia has changed a few of these things. But in the past, it was typically every 4 hours, all right, that the user was kind of the lifespan of this. So you had some situations where even though the user might be logging in again, if it still had a valid token that was in 4 hours of expiration, it didn't bother checking with the IDP, all right? And then, hilarity might ensue because maybe they're using an old password, not the new one. The new settings in Sequoia to force the password validation on every sign-in can somewhat fix this, but they also bring some maybe unintended consequences about always checking the password every time you sign in, right? So if you're offline, other things might be harder. How does this work with File Vault? Reasonably well, right? And now in Sequoia, it will have the ability to check live on your network, asterisk with some types of networks, not all types of networks. Your mileage may vary. I think it's in the documentation now.
I haven't seen it documented.
All right. So do note that if it's not checking when you sign in at File Vault, it may be your network. There are some forms of wireless encryption that it is expecting. I think if you have an open network, it won't try to do this for fear of your DNS being maybe hijacked.
So you want to upgrade from WEP.
So you want to upgrade from WEP. But Sequoia does bring the option to force the check at file vault. How does this work with MFA? Not really, right, as we've discussed, right? Either you buy into the fact that the device is MFA, which I don't think is crazy, but I do think might run counter to some of your regulators and compliance officers that you have to deal with. Does the user have to interact with PSSO to get it set up? We've already asked this question, and the answer to that is yes. And that is by design, so it's a feature, not a bug. All right, let's see it. And with that, I introduce Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm now going to stand over on the side and make snide comments as Tim goes through this.
I would expect nothing less from you, Joel. And as one final remark on Joel's stuff, I was supposed to have 30 minutes for a demo and 15 minutes for questions, so this might be quick.
You're the one that said a lot of things.
Yeah, I said a lot of things. All right, fair enough. All right, so one thing that I wanted to point out, we've talked about a lot of things, so I wanted to point out that I have on our website, I put, if you go to twocanoes.com/SSO, if I can spell it right. Sue. There's me in my lab coat, same one, same sticker. But this is where we're putting all the resources. Oh, geez, it's playing my video.
We don't need you, Tim.
You don't need me, sorry.
Hit play.
All right, so all the resources that we're talking about, all the code that links to all the other links with stuff for this, I'm putting here, because then I can tell people go to twocanoes.com/SSO. There is some tutorials, building your own single sign-on extension for iOS and for macOS, because PSSO is priming the pump, as Joel said. You really want to realize that it's for a single sign-on extension, so we walk through being able to do that, provide a sample code. And one of the things that does come out is it's not a separate extension. PSSO is a additional couple of functions to the single sign-on extension inside your container app. So we provide sample code for all this. I wrote, there's a understanding the single sign-on extension, and then we have the PSSO technical deep dive that I just finished. I did a contract with Apple to help document some of these things, provide tutorials, document it in a way that's more focused for sysadmins and developers to do it, instead of kind of the technical details on like the crypto. And that's one of the things is like we all work at certain levels, and I wanted to make this accessible to folks that want to focus on, I'm an IDP, I want to implement this, I'm not a crypto guy. And a lot of crypto and what Apple's doing is, what did you say, it was cutting edge but standard kind of thing. So they're not limited by, but since the Secure Enclave is all elliptical curve, it's all elliptical curve stuff, which might not be in necessarily your libraries, or maybe it's a library you have to add in. So I did put all the different pieces. Joel already went through what's new. I just wanted to point this out. There's some new keys. So this kind of outlines those keys. You could go diving in the documentation for that. And there's a UI change that we'll show in just a bit. But the kind of the most interesting things is the GitHub.
Why not Bitbucket, Tim?
Yeah, well, it turns out people want to go to GitHub because that's the cool one. All right, so there is multiple projects on this. So what I did is I bifurcated. Basically, Joel did a bunch of investigation on how to set up a sample implementation in Go. And there was a lot of web stuff and crypto stuff and pieces that were reused, but variable names that were shared.
Thank you.
So what I tried to do is I pulled out all the crypto. So because a lot of times, like if I want to have a function, I'm writing my code, I find a crypto library, just include it, now it magically works. So there's two projects, PSSO Server and PSSO SDK-Go. And this has all the crypto in it, and it's highly documented, and it's a reference implementation for the crypto. And my hope is if anybody's developing this and you're not doing it in Go, it'll be well commented out, the crypto, what they're doing, so it'll be easy to port over to your other language. If you are a developer that doesn't want to do, you want to do the web stuff, and you want to do the token stuff, you don't need to worry about the crypto because you just include this library, you can call the functions and it does it for you. And so I try to separate that out. So that's it for like the developer standpoint. But if you want to set up, another piece of this is we set up the crypto's in one piece, but I also want to set up like the web stuff so you can do sample implementation and learn about it, right? So as these IDPs implement this and you give feedback to Apple, understanding what it's supposed to do is important because then you can have a conversation and you're all on the same plane kind of thing. So let me set this up. I use Virtual Buddy, and I created 2 VMs, both of them in Sequoia. Let me start these up. These are vanilla, pretty much. I did do some magic, basically installed the developer tools to get Git, and also I installed Go because seeing me click through a package is not what you're here for. And so I have a PSSO client, which is pretty much vanilla, and a PSSO server that has Go and Git installed on it. Oh, and so this is inside the documentation for what I'm going to go through is here. So it's step by step, reviewed by somebody on a new machine that didn't work on this project at all, which is important because everything when I just write it up seems to work for me, and then it doesn't work for anybody else. So first thing I did is I installed Go, and I did Xcode select install to give me the command line tools. This is cross-platform in Go, so you can run it on Linux as well. You can run it on Windows. Windows has some weird slashes that are different, but it should be completely portable over to Linux. And if you know how to do Go in Windows, it should be easy for that too. All right, so let me go into my server. Pull up my documentation so I can copy and paste the commands. Oh, I wanted to. Oh, right. So on the server, the first thing I want to do, so one of the things Joel said is you have to have, you don't have to have this live on the internet because of the well-known hosts, associated domains. That's used by the single sign-on extension. If you're not using the tokens for anything, you're just setting up for PSSO, you can do this private. You do need to have a certificate for the server that's trusted in the root store of the Mac of the client. No, you can't install it with a profile. No, you can't mark it as trusted. It has to be in the root store by Apple. No ifs, ands, or buts. Luckily, you can go register your own domain and pay money, or you can just set up Let's Encrypt, have it put it into a folder, and then just grab it and run it internally. Because you control your own DNS, and like I'm going to show my DNS is Etsy host. So you can just put the name in there, you have a trusted certificate, it's trusted by the Mac, it all works. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Is I will look on the server. Oh, no, sorry, I'm going to clone my repo first. Okay, so this has Go installed. What? Did I not install it? Oh, please let Git be there. Oh, okay, at least it's easy to install Go. It's not so easy to, I swear I installed Go last night, but you're going to watch me install a package. Yeah. If I didn't install the developer tools, we'd be here for a while.
Go is better than Python, by the way. Just putting that out there.
All right, so our steps we're going to do is we're going to just basically clone the repository down and start it up. And then find out the IP address and add it to the client, and then be able to talk to each other. And then it should work. We'll enroll in MDM and we'll be done. All right. All right, so let's, here. Oh, sorry. A lot. Okay, so we'll clone this from the repository. Hey, it worked. CD into it. Increase the font size. There we go. Okay, I'm in here, and as the application in here. One of the other things I need to do is I installed the SSO certs. By default, it goes in Etsy PSSO. You can put it anywhere you want to, but then you have to set an environment variable to do it. So I won't do that. I'll just put it here. And I didn't copy, I thought I copied those in. Where did I put it? Oops. I don't know what I'm doing.
You're not in your VM.
I'm not in the VM? No, I'm not, because I forgot to copy the certificates onto this, so I'm going to have to do that. So that's all right. I set up a key to, oh, right. Now that I do it, it's going into user shared, because that's where I always copy stuff. There it is. Okay, I found it. All right, so I'll just copy this. So this is, sorry, the font size is small. I don't want to put in my keychain because I don't care about that. There's a private key and the chain, and if you look at this, this is issued by Let's Encrypt, and it's not expired, and it has a domain name associated with it called psso.2canoes.com, which is not a registered domain. Oh, no, it is. I had to do that, but it doesn't have anything hosted on it. I just put it in our DNS to get Let's Encrypt to give it to me. So I copied these into this folder. And so now that's the SSL certs my server is going to use. That's one of the big requirements. So I put get into here, and now I'm going to go mod tidy, which is, what? I installed go twice.
You need to open a new terminal.
Okay, whatever, it's fine. All right, okay, paste. There we go, so it downloads all the required packages. You don't have to go in and do it manually. And then we can run the app. So I'm going to run as root because it has a listener on 443. Here we go. And then all of these, so I also factored out all of the variables that are set. So if you look down at the bottom, if you want to set any of the where the audience in the token is, what the IP address is, the JWKS file, all that stuff. But I made sane defaults. But the one thing I didn't know, it's based on your domain name, so you have to feed it that. So let me put that in, put my command in. Okay. And I did not use this example one. I used, I think it was psso.2canoes.com. And here's the big money one. It's supposed to say 443 somewhere.
Still working up there.
Oh, it's still working. It's up there. Joel.
You didn't elevate your privileges in that one.
You're in the wrong window.
In the wrong window. Yeah, right.
Everyone doesn't know how to go.
It's
Sudo bang bang.
whatever. Okay, here we go. I did
Sudo bang
tidy.
bang.
Paste. What's that?
Sudo, never mind.
It's oh, in that other one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Paste. Run. Ah!
Sudo bang bang.
I refuse.
Don't trigger me more.
Yay for me! Okay. What's that? Yeah, well, Control C. I should have done bang bang.
Should have done bang bang.
Right, thank you for catching that. I'm going to need to have you guys all behind my shoulder when I'm coding this. All right. Yay! There we go. So now this is running, but any machine that connects up to it's going to do it by IP address because there's no DNS entry. So I have to go over to the client and tell it what the IP to the host one is, and I'll do it in a very caveman way. I'll use ifconfig en0. And this is where the network might get weird. I'm just caveating it shouldn't, but let me see. Oh, I thought my other VM shut down. Okay. 6 minutes. Oh, my Lord. I'm very close.
We have faith.
Yeah, thanks.
Tim. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, no, it the opposite of helped me. Okay.
Joel.
Okay, I will.
Joel. Does that help?
Surprisingly, no, it doesn't. Okay, there we go. So I'll just put in Etsy host. I'll put in my 10.201.125.200, and this is psso.twocanoes.com. Okay, and now if I ping psso.twocanoes.com, yay, the DNS works. Okay, now open up a browser, and if I go to https://psso.twocanoes.com, which isn't on the internet, I'll get a page not found, which seems scary, but that's actually good because there's no splash page for it because we're running a web service here. I like to go to nonce because the more nonces you have, the better. So I know it's up and running. And oh, the cool thing is,
Tim uses the alternative pronunciation of nonce.
the correct one? Ooh, okay. So you can see when I run this, I get logging. Right? For me, somebody that has a lab coat on, it's great. I'm poking it on one side and it's coming out the other side, right? It sounds dirtier than I meant it to be. I apologize. Okay, Joel, you actually know this. So it's .well dash or underscore well known.
Well dash known
Well dash known
slash Apple.
no jwks.json. Okay, I'll do that one. So this
JWEX.
is, remember we said we had the private and public, the public key was transferred up to the IDP. The IDP has to tell it what its public keys are. So you have this mutual relationship with respect. It advertises at the JWKS. So this is advertising its keys out. I'm just showing off there, but it's cool. The other thing is what, Joel, you got to tell me this one. Apple
dash app
dash
site
site.
dash association.
I can't spell association.
You're right, you can't.
Association. Okay. This isn't needed here, but I still put it out. Joel confronted me with this, like, how do you know it's not needed if it's advertising it? So I went and I took it out, and it still worked, and it's not registered on the internet, so you don't need this, and no SSO plugin will work if you don't have this. Okay, so now it looks like it's working. The only reason I did this to web form is just to verify it's working. So now what I need to do is I need to enroll this machine and install an app. So luckily, I put things I can double click on. So if I go into the enrollment, and then I'll go and approve it. There it is. I'll enroll. Please push. Oh, yes. Okay. So now I have these keys that basically this is the very basic stuff that you'll be able to use. It does use password and it does use shared keys. So this is version 2.0. And since I have 2 minutes left, I'm not going to stew on that. Now, you notice I didn't get prompted because I don't have an app installed. And so you need an app. I did a build of our app called Scissors. It's called Scissors because you search for SSO in SF symbols. It's one of the two icons that comes up. Not one of, there's no SSO in Devil, by the way. Okay.
I'm formulating a comeback for that. But I may need some time.
Okay, and this installs with the packages, because installing it with the package, you should get, and if this works, and I'm on time, 2 minutes, yay, registration. So you click on it. Or, oh, and look, and it did. Oh, that's my request for the site association. It didn't request that. Okay, so good. Now I'm going to hit continue, and this is the dialog. You know what it says? TC admin, which is my local user account, and I'll put in my local user. And then it should, I'll put in my local user password, and then it will, what?
Thank you, Sequoia.
All right, so it can discover devices, it can find my Apple TV on the network for some reason, and then it's asking my identity provider, or any provider's username and password. It's johnnyapplec@twocanoes.com, and I'll put in the password, which could be the same or it could be different. And it did accept it, but it's not, it didn't. Oh. Oh, no, not at the last moment. Error opening read and read file. Hold on, hold on. It means Go can't reach the password. I had this error. Oh, that's it. That was the sound. I'm still up? Okay.
Shout over it.
That's not helpful to demo. All right. Can we just pretend this works, and then I could log out and log back in? Any ideas? It worked when I went through it twice last night. I can reboot.
There and read file. Yeah. Yeah, reboot. Why not?
I didn't. I really should have done a sudo bang bang, and then it would.
You should have. Had you done a sudo bang bang, we'd be at the lunch by now.
Yep.
Is there lunch after this?
There is. There is.
Ah, that's a little surprise.
Actually,
and
there's
delight.
not lunch after. There's lunch right now.
But there's lunch right now. We're holding everyone up for lunch. So as Tim reboots, he's done an amazing amount of work on this. We are very excited and hopeful that people start playing around with it more. Because we do believe that the way to make Platform SSO better is to have more people using Platform SSO and understanding the flows and seeing how it fits into your environment and where you can go with that.
Ah, well.
All right.
Anyways, it does work. I ran through it twice last night, and it worked fine, so I don't know what
And it works in the video that you have online?
Yeah, it works on the video online. So there is in the sample code, there's 3 users. Each one's a part of different groups. So if this actually went through, you would log out, and you can log in with either one of those users, and it would create the accounts. So
Thank you very much.
thank you, everybody.